So hey guys, welcome back to another video. In today's video we'll be doing the digestive system under the subject of human social biology at the CSEC level. Now, when you look at on the screen, you have seen some a human body with which are labeled by a list of name. We have the mouth, the salivary glands, the esophagus, the liver, the gallbladder, the appendix, the stomach, pancreas, the large intestine, the small intestine, the rectum, and the anus. And all of that is what makes up the digestive system. So in today's video, we are going to learn how to explain the process of digestion. Now, first we will be looking at the mouth. Briefly, we are not going in deep details. We are going to do the basic and then move on. So we know that the mouth is the physical site of action in the process of digestion, right? So why it is said as the physical site of action is because it is can the mouth can be seen, right? So it is physical to our human eyes. So the mouth is the physical site of action in the process of digestion. And when we think about the mouth, what type of digestion would comes to mind? The type of digestion that would comes to mind is mechanical digestion. So mechanical digestion occur when food are physically broken down, right? So mechanical digestion is what takes place in the mouth. Moving on, we are still at the mouth, but moving on to the salivary glands. Now, the salivary glands is located in the mouth and it plays a vital role in the digestive process. The salivary glands produce a juice which is called the saliva, as we know. Um, this saliva contains amylase that serve the purpose of also breaking down starch, not only to keep our mouth moisture, but to break down starch. I know you all not a lot of you didn't know. So you know that the saliva contains the enzyme which is amylase to breaks down starch to maltose. When the amylase, as I said previously, mix with the saliva, it breaks down starch to produce maltose, right? So when the amylase mix together along with the saliva, it breaks down starch to maltose, and that saliva along with the amylase is known as salivary amylase. Okay. Then the food, moving on to the esophagus, then the food move to the esophagus. The esophagus transport, I should say, transport the food to the stomach. And when the food enter the stomach, the stomach doesn't react at the same time. But but the stomach, we all know that the stomach contains a lot of acid, and the stomach occur at a pH level of acidic. We know that we have three types of pH level: acidic, neutral, and alkaline. The mouth occur at a pH level of neutral, and the stomach occur at a pH level of acidic. So when the foods is passed down the esophagus to the stomach, the purpose of the stomach is to break down the food into digestible molecules, right? So that is the purpose of the stomach, to break down the food into smaller molecules or digestible molecules. The stomach walls produce gastric juice which contains hydrochloric acid. So when we know that the stomach juice contains hydrochloric acid, but the question is, what is the purpose of the hydrochloric acid? So the purpose of the hydrochloric acid is to produce acid for the stomach. Also in that juice we have the digestive enzyme, which is called pepsin. The pepsin is known for acting on the nutrients protein, right? So the pepsin is known for acting on the nutrients protein to produce the product called peptides and amino acid. When that food is then broken down in the stomach, it then pass. Look at the arrow. It then pass. So here's the stomach, and then that food then pass to the small intestine. Now there are three sections of the small intestine. These sections are the duodenum, the jejunum, and the ileum. The duodenum is responsible for when the food just transferred to the small intestine, it will then enter the duodenum and stay there so that the pancreas can produce pancreatic juice, which contains three classes of enzymes. So we understand. So the duodenum doesn't really do any absorption or nothing like that. That's where the food stays. So when the food leave the stomach, it enters the duodenum, it stay there until the pancreas produce pancreatic juice, which contains three classes of enzyme. We are going to explain what are those classes of enzymes. So those classes of enzymes are amylases, lipases, and proteases. These enzymes so the amylase act on starch, as we said previously in the mouth. It act on starch to produce maltose. The lipase act on lipids or fats and oils to produce fatty acid and glycerol, while the proteases act on proteins to produce peptides and amino acid. These enzymes then absorb some of the nutrients, which are starch, lipids, and protein, which I mentioned before. Then the food then moves from the duodenum to the jejunum and the ileum. So the jejunum is the middle section of the small intestine, and the ileum is the last part of the small intestine. The jejunum and the ileum, they are responsible for absorption. So when the food moves from the duodenum to the jejunum and the ileum, then absorption begins. When the food is being absorbed, it is absorbed by the intestinal juice. So we know, we have mentioned before, every I would say that every site of action, they produce their own what you would call, they produce their own juice, I should say, or they produce their own enzyme which act upon whatever procedure or whatever process are occurring. So like the mouth, we know the mouth have the amylase, the stomach have the pepsin, the small intestine now has its intestinal juice, and the pancreas or the pancreas produce pancreatic juice. So moving on back to the intestinal juice. In the intestinal juice, before the food is absorbed, the some of this juice, some of this enzyme which are inside of the intestinal juice are maltase, sucrase, lactase, and lipase. Now the maltase produce not produce, but the maltase act on maltose to produce glucose. The sucrase act on sucrose to produce fructose, and the lactase act on lactose to produce galactose and glucose. Also, lipase act on lipids to produce fatty acid and glycerol. And all of those which are produced, they are absorbed into the blood. When they are absorbed into the blood, then after we want to exercise, or we want to do any physical activity, we want to run, whatever exercise you want to do, then assimilation come into place, right? So I know many of you aren't familiar with the word assimilation, but that's where assimilation come into place. Assimilation is I should say it's the point wherein glucose are being absorbed into the blood, and then when we are doing any physical activity or physical exercise, then that glucose is being used up. So assimilation is the process by which absorbed molecules are being used up for energy. Okay? Yes. So we know that when our food is being absorbed, it goes into our bloodstream, then assimilation. Moving on to then the last part, which is excretion. Are not excretion. Excretion isn't involved in the process of digestion, but I should say egestion. Now, egestion is the release or the removal of undigested food from the body, right? So undigested food which are not digested in the which are not being absorbed in the small intestine then move to the large intestine, right? It moves to the large intestine, and then the large intestine, we know when it's time for us to pass, so we pass out our waste as feces. So that's the process of egestion. But also, one of the key things that we are supposed to know is that in the small intestine, if our body is lack of water and we doesn't have enough water, absorption still can take place in the large intestine, because our body would have absorbed that water which are in the small intestine. Our body would have absorbed that in order to replace for the water that are missing from our body, or the water that aren't available. So whenever time you go to school or class, and you know your teacher is teaching on anything, and maybe persons are asking how this large intestine, how does absorption takes place in the large intestine, you would have tell them it's not really a regular thing, but if your body is lack of water, then absorption would have taken place in the large intestine, due to your body would have absorb that water which is in the large intestine. But also that water is not it is not it should not be regularly absorbed, because remember that the large intestine, it consists of waste. So the large intestine, it is consists of waste, and that water is very poisonous for our body. The rectum. The rectum is the muscle below our above our anus. So it holds the waste, and it also, when that muscle contracts, we know that it is time for us to go and release that waste, right? So the rectum, it holds the waste materials, and it tells us whenever we want we are ready to pass out. So thank you guys for watching this video. Hope you have learned something, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and please leave a comment below. Bye bye, guys.